What would you think if I told you most men don't even know what real strength looks like when they're in love? You think it's about loyalty, about how much you give, about being different from the rest. But that's not strength, that's performance, that's bargaining, that's you saying, please, see me, please, choose me. And here's the cold truth, the more you try to be loved, the more invisible you become to her. Because strength, real strength, doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It doesn't overcompensate. It doesn't show up early with flowers hoping she notices. It doesn't check in 5 times a day, praying she still wants you. And it sure as hell doesn't get anxious when she pulls away. That's not strength. That's emotional dependence wrapped in good intentions. Imagine this, you're texting her. She replies slow, cold, one-word answers. You feel it, that panic, that fear she's losing interest. So you start trying harder, more emojis, more compliments, longer texts. You tell yourself, I'm just being caring. But deep down, you're scared. And she feels it. You're not being strong, you're being needy. See, most men were taught that love is something to earn, to prove yourself worthy of. You were probably never told that being yourself, quietly grounded, calm, self-respecting, is what creates real pull. No one told you that detachment isn't cold, it's magnetic. That indifference to chaos is seductive. That not reacting is often the most powerful reaction. But let's break it down. What's really happening in those moments when she pulls back? It's a test. Not always conscious, but always real. She wants to know, are you solid? Or will you crumble the second her energy disappears? And too many men fail that test by chasing, explaining, over-loving, by assuming her silence means they've done something wrong and needing her to reassure them they haven't. That's not strength, that's fear in disguise. Strong men don't chase, they observe, they lean back. They give space. And here's the twist, they don't do it to manipulate. They do it because their self-worth doesn't live in her hands. They know who they are. They know what they offer. And they never beg to be seen. Because love isn't about being loud. It's about being anchored. Let me give you a story. A man I knew, we'll call him James, was dating a woman who seemed perfect for him. Smart, funny, confident. But every time she got distant, he would panic. He'd write long texts, offer to cook dinner, say things like, I just want to make you happy. And at first, she appreciated it. But slowly, she started losing interest. Why? Because she could feel he didn't love himself enough to stop overgiving. He was trying to be everything she wanted, and in doing so, he stopped being anything at all. She didn't leave because he was a bad man. She left because he was a scared one. Now imagine the opposite. A man who notices her shift in energy. Instead of reacting, he mirrors it. He pauses. He doesn't chase clarity, he waits for it. He continues living. He lets her feel the space. And if she comes back, he watches not with need, but with discernment. That's strength. Because when a man truly values himself, he doesn't fear loss. He doesn't rush to fix. He doesn't pour more into a bucket that's clearly leaking. He steps back and says, I'll be here if it's real, but I won't beg for it. And here's the most important tactical truth you need to understand. If she senses that your identity depends on her validation, the attraction dies. Quietly, slowly, but it dies. So stop trying to prove you're good enough. Stop trying to heal her past. Stop treating love like a resume. You don't need to be the most generous, the most patient, the most emotionally available man she's ever known. You need to be the most centered one. Because strength in love is not about what you give her. It's about what you refuse to give up in yourself. So I'll ask you this now. Have you ever caught yourself overgiving just to keep her interested? What's the one thing you did that you thought was love, but now realize was fear. Which moment in your past do you wish you had stayed calm instead of chasing her approval? You want to know how strong men love women. They love them without losing themselves. They love without collapsing into their emotions, without turning into servants of approval, without drowning in every cold text or distant stare. They love like a man who knows the world won't end if she walks away. That's where most men fail, because deep down, you think that if she loves you, you matter more. If she chooses you, then you're finally enough. You treat her acceptance like it's the finish line of your masculinity, and so your love becomes desperate, fragile, conditional. You confuse loyalty with submission. You think standing by her side means tolerating emotional swings, walking on eggshells, giving up your voice so you don't push her away. But love without boundaries is not love. It's self-erasure. You don't win her heart by disappearing into her needs. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. There's a guy named Marcus, worked hard, stable job, loyal to the bone. He started dating a woman who had this emotional storm around her, hot and cold, loving one day, cruel the next. And Marcus, he thought loving her meant weathering every storm she threw. She'd get upset at small things, him not replying fast enough, not remembering the exact date of something she mentioned in passing. He'd apologize, bring flowers, try harder. She'd go silent for days. He'd write long texts, offering to talk. She'd make him feel small, and he'd shrink even more just to make things better. You know how that ended. She left him for someone colder, more indifferent, less nice, and Marcus was shattered. He thought being everything for her would be the reason she stayed, but it was the reason she left. Here's the psychological trap: women don't consciously want to disrespect you, but when you allow it, they lose respect anyway. Not because they're evil, but because they're wired to respond to boundaries, to certainty, to emotional leadership. A woman's emotional tests are like waves. If she pushes and you fall, she can't trust you to hold her. If she pulls away and you chase, she knows your heart is unstable. And here's the brutal truth: the moment she realizes you'll abandon yourself just to keep her, she stops seeing you as the man. She starts mothering you, correcting you, testing you more, because you've just told her silently that she's in control. Strong men break that pattern. They don't explain their worth, they withhold it. You don't win her respect by telling her how good of a man you are. You win it by walking away the moment she starts acting like you're not. That's not arrogance, that's self-respect. And if she leaves because of that boundary, let her. If a woman only stays when you accept her disrespect, then she was never yours to begin with. She was only attached to your weakness. You have to stop believing that love means enduring everything. Sometimes, the strongest love is walking away when you're not being loved back in the right way. Let me get tactical. If she goes cold on you, don't chase. Mirror her energy. Let silence speak. If she criticizes you unfairly, don't explain or defend calmly. Say, "I'm not going to be talked to like that," and leave the space. If she tries to guilt you into giving more than you're comfortable with, ask yourself, would I respect myself tomorrow for saying yes today? If the answer is no, say no. If she withholds affection to manipulate you, don't argue, don't beg, detach. If she cares, she'll return with respect. If she doesn't, she was never emotionally mature enough to begin with. Every strong man learns this. At some point, you do not love a woman by dissolving into her moods. You love her by staying firm in your own. And here's the paradox: most men don't understand the moment you stop chasing her validation. She starts chasing your presence, not because of some manipulation trick, but because strength is rare, and rare things are attractive. So I want to ask you, have you ever found yourself apologizing just to end an argument you didn't start? Have you ever given more than you had, hoping it would earn you peace? What would your love look like if you stopped needing to be chosen? Let's be honest, you weren't taught how to love like a strong man. You were taught how to please, how to compromise yourself, how to keep the peace. You were told that being a good guy meant being soft, understanding, emotionally available, forgiving no matter how badly you were treated. And maybe that worked once. Maybe it won you praise. Maybe it made your mother proud. But in the emotional war zone of modern dating, that kind of love gets you eaten alive. You want to know what strong love looks like. It's quiet, it's discerning, it doesn't flinch at distance, it doesn't collapse under confusion, it doesn't react when she pulls back. Because strong men don't need to be reassured, they need to be respected. But too many men confuse love with access, as if being allowed to stay is the prize, as if her tolerating your presence is something you need to protect at all costs. So you tiptoe, you tolerate disrespect, you ignore your gut. You play along with emotional games because the thought of losing her feels worse than the cost of losing yourself. That's the real tragedy. Not that she leaves, but that you disappear from yourself long before she walks out the door. And let me tell you something else you'll never feel more alone than when you're in a relationship where you're not allowed to be real, where you're always adjusting, always censoring, always giving more and getting less. That kind of love starves you, slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up and realize you've become a shell of the man you were before her. That's not love, that's emotional servitude. Let's get tactical again. A woman says, "I just need space." What do? Most men panic, they beg, they offer comfort, they say things like, "Whatever you need, I'm here." But strong men, they don't argue with space. They give it, fully, calmly. They say, "Take all the time you need," and then they move on with their life. Because if a woman needs distance, let her feel what that actually means. Let her experience a world without your presence. Don't fill the gap. Don't send flowers. Don't post quotes online hoping she'll notice. Let silence do the work. And here's the truth behind that move. It's not punishment, it's revelation. It reveals whether she truly values what you bring, or whether she just enjoyed having you as an emotional backup plan. You want another example? Let's talk about emotional bait. She says something sharp, maybe even cruel. She's trying to get a rise out of you. Maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's insecurity. Maybe she just wants to know she can still control your center. And most men, they bite, they react, they argue, they raise their voice. And in doing so, they hand over all their power. Strong men don't bite, they observe. They know when a comment is designed to test them, and instead of engaging, they lean back. They say something simple like, "That's an interesting thing to say," and move on. No anger, no validation, no drama, just distance, just dignity. And that distance, that's the reset. Because a woman can only spin her emotional storm if you hold the rope. Let go of the rope, and the storm has nowhere to land. Now look, this doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you shut down emotionally or become cold and distant forever. It means you stop bleeding for someone who keeps stabbing you with silence, with guilt, with manipulation disguised as emotional honesty. Strong men love with presence, not submission. They give, but not beyond their own boundary. They care, but never at the expense of their self-respect. They stay, but only where they're truly valued. And when they walk away, it's not because they've stopped loving, it's because they've started protecting their love from being wasted. So ask yourself this: how many times have you stayed silent to keep the peace and ended up resenting her for it? How many times have you tried to prove your love through overgiving, hoping she'd finally see your worth? And how many times have you ignored your own discomfort just to avoid losing someone who didn't care if you lost yourself? Be honest in the comments. Let's get one thing straight. Loving a woman doesn't mean giving her power over your emotions. It means standing in front of her open, present, vulnerable if necessary, but never unstable. You don't flinch when she's angry. You don't melt when she cries. You don't apologize just to stop her from walking out the door. You stay rooted, calm, because your self-worth isn't sitting in her hands like some fragile offering. But most men, they hand it over anyway. And when they do, something inside her shifts. She stops trusting you, not because you were unkind, but because you became unreliable emotionally. That's the part no one tells you. She doesn't want a man who reacts to her every mood. She wants a man who holds steady in the storm. Because if she feels like she's more emotionally grounded than you even for a second, the polarity collapses. The attraction dries up, and suddenly, you're trying harder while she's caring less. You've felt that shift before, haven't you? You thought everything was fine. You were giving, showing up, loving with everything you had. But slowly, her energy changed. Her words became sharper. Her warmth became rare. She started saying things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're not the man I thought you were," and you didn't understand why. But I'll tell you, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It's because you gave too much of yourself away. Strong men don't give themselves away. They invite a woman in, and only if she earns it. Let's go tactical again. What do strong men do when a woman accuses them of something unfair? Cheating, not caring enough, being too cold. They don't go into defense mode. They don't spill paragraphs of explanation trying to fix her perception. They say, "That's not true," but you're free to believe it. That's power, because it tells her, "I don't need your belief in me to believe in myself." If she's mature, she'll pause. She'll respect you more. If she's not, she'll escalate. And when she escalates, you don't join her at that level. You stay calm. And if she keeps pushing, you walk. Not to punish her, but because you refuse to stay where you're constantly questioned. Your calmness isn't a weapon, it's your shield. And here's another common trap. A woman stops initiating affection. No hugs, no kisses, no soft eyes. You notice it, but you don't say anything. You hope it'll pass. Maybe you try harder, more compliments, more attention, but nothing changes. In fact, it gets colder. You know why? Because she can feel you're trying to fix the emotional gap with performance and not with presence. Strong men don't compensate, they communicate. You look her in the eyes and say, "I've noticed a shift. You've become distant. If there's something you're feeling, I want to hear it. But I won't keep giving love into a space that's gone quiet." That one sentence can change everything. Why? Because it tells her two things. You're aware. You're not afraid to walk if your needs aren't being met. That's what makes her feel your value again. Not more gifts, not more reassurance, not more bending to her mood, but the clarity of your standard. You don't just want love, you require respect. And here's the core truth most men don't understand. You don't get respect by asking for it. You get it by embodying it every single time. That means you speak directly. You don't tolerate passive aggression. You don't pretend things are fine when they're not. And when someone starts playing with your heart like it's a toy, you stop the game. Cold. And if she leaves, let her. Because strong men never beg for someone who's careless with their heart. So ask yourself now, when was the last time you kept quiet to avoid losing her and ended up losing yourself? What's the boundary you knew you should have drawn, but didn't? And if you were truly honest with yourself, how much of your love has been driven by fear? Drop your answers in the comments. There's a moment every man faces. The moment you sit in silence. Alone, and ask yourself, was it even love? Or was I just afraid to be without her? You remember the fights, the long texts you wrote that she never answered, the slow fade of affection, the way she used to light up when you walked into the room, and how, toward the end, she barely looked up from her phone. And yet, you stayed through coldness, through guilt trips, through silent treatments, through the way she weaponized your kindness. And maybe you told yourself it was patience, loyalty, real love. But deep down, you know what it really was. Fear. You were afraid that if you walked away, you'd be proving her right that you weren't strong enough to stay, that you couldn't handle a real relationship, that maybe you were too sensitive, too needy, too much. But here's the truth you've avoided for too long. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect. And that's why this ends here. That version of you, the one who chased, who explained, who gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left, he doesn't make it out of this chapter. He dies here. Because strong men love differently. They don't love to be loved back. They love because they are love with or without her. They don't lose themselves in the fire. They become the fire. They don't ask a woman, "What do you want from me?" They ask themselves, "What am I no longer willing to lose in the name of love?" They don't try to be everything. They are something steady, clear, non-negotiable. Let's bring this into reality one last time. You're with a woman. She tests you emotionally. Maybe she gets cold. Maybe she says, "You don't really care about me." Maybe she disappears for a day and comes back like nothing happened. You don't chase. You don't argue. You don't try to prove your care with overgiving. You mirror her energy. You show concern once. You give space once. And then you get back to your life. If she returns with respect, you engage. If not, you let the door close gently, finally, without resentment. Why? Because the love you give is expensive now. Not in money, but in access, in energy, in availability. Strong men don't love everyone deeply. They choose carefully. And once they love, they do it from fullness, not from hunger. You want to be strong. Then never let her silence speak louder than your standards. Never let her distance force you into pursuit. Never let your fear of losing her be stronger than your duty to protect your peace. Because the right woman doesn't test your identity. She rests in it. She doesn't want to control you. She wants to trust you. But she can only trust what stands firm when pushed. And she can only fall into a man who never falls apart when she pulls away. So here's your final reminder. Stop loving like a boy hoping to be chosen. Start loving like a man who already is. And if she can't match your strength, don't bend. Let her go. Because sometimes, the most loving thing a strong man can say is no more. She didn't break you. She revealed what you were too afraid to protect.